A ceasefire amid drone strikes. Welcome to peace talks in the 21st century. As strange as it sounds, this is the reality in Ukraine. There is a ceasefire in place, but it's not clear what it covers. Ukraine and the United States say it covers energy and civilian sides. But Russia says only the energy sector, the rest is fair game. And both sides are making good use of this confusion. Russia fired 171 drones at Ukraine today. Dozens of them were shot down, but the rest hit targets across the country. Video shows smoke and fire over Ukrainian cities. Similar strikes were reported yesterday too. Take a look at this. Ukraine also launched attacks today. They fired around 130 drones at Russia. One of the targets was the Engels Air Base. Now, this is not located near the front line. It is more than 700 kilometers away from Ukraine's border, 700 kilometers. It's also a very important air base. Engels hosts Russia's nuclear bomber planes. Unofficially, these are called White Swans. It's not clear if those planes were damaged, but footage showed a massive fire and damage to a nearby hospital. Like I said, it's a strained ceasefire, but the hope is to build on this partial agreement to ultimately sign a full ceasefire. Ukraine is certainly keen on that. Yesterday, their president, Volodymyr Zelensky, spoke to Donald Trump. You may remember how their last conversation went. It ended with Zelensky being kicked out of the White House. This time, things went better. Trump and Zelensky spoke for close to 1 hour. The US president called it a very good phone call. He said it centered around the conversation that he had with President Putin. So basically, it was a debrief of sorts. Zelensky called the conversation positive and frank. He also called for a full truce. Of course, that means making concessions to Russia. But is Zelensky willing to make those concessions? He says there is no pressure from Donald Trump to do so.
Today, I have not felt any pressure from President Trump. There wasn't any pressure, that's a fact. I am a sincere person. If that were the case, I would say.
So what are the next steps? How do we turn this partial truce into a full truce? Well, that requires mainly two things. One is building trust, and the second is more talks and diplomacy. That's what you need. Trust building will not be easy, not after 3 years of intense fighting. But yesterday we saw a ray of hope. Russia and Ukraine released 350 prisoners of war. That's 175 prisoners from each side. They were released, they were welcomed with celebrations and relief. Take a look. This was one of the largest prisoner swaps since the invasion. It's a good move, but it's not going to be enough, as evident from today's drone exchanges. Which brings us to the second step, talks and diplomacy. Engagements are happening all over Europe. In Brussels, European Union leaders huddled for a summit. It was their second meeting this month. All countries except Hungary are expected to back Ukraine's sovereignty. Zelensky spoke to the leaders via video link. Again, it was sort of a debrief. He told EU leaders about his conversation with Donald Trump. He also urged Putin to drop so-called unnecessary demands. The second key meeting is happening in Britain. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer is hosting EU defence ministers, and this meeting is focused on maintaining the peace. Like which countries will deploy peacekeepers, what sort of weapons will Ukraine get, and how can Russia be deterred? That's what they'll all discuss. London says around 30 countries have agreed to contribute. If not with soldiers, then in some other way. They'll all pitch in. And Prime Minister Starmer means business, because ahead of this meeting, he made a big visit. Starmer travelled to Northern Ireland, to where the UK's nuclear weapons are stored, and he made it a point to flaunt them.
We've just come off the Vanguard-class submarine to see the team. They've just been on a tour constantly at sea, part of our nuclear deterrent, and it was the opportunity to say to them at the end of a long patrol, welcome home and thank you for the incredible work that they've put in keeping our country safe and working with NATO allies on an essential part of our defence capabilities.
So Europe and the UK are coordinating, and their approach will be very significant because Zelensky knows that Europe is more reliable than Donald Trump. So he will depend on advice and input from Europe. Apparently, President Macron of France is taking the lead here. Zelensky says he speaks to Macron almost every day. In fact, yesterday, Macron called Zelensky during Zelensky's press conference. This is how it played out.
Sorry, Manuel, I have just conversation with the journalist. Can I be back in some minutes, in 15-20 minutes? Yeah, please. Thank you, Manuel. Okay, great, bye-bye. Я тільки що розмовляв з президентом Макроном.
Yes, I have just spoken to President Macron, to Emmanuel. We often talk a lot, once a day, on average.
В середньому і дійсно у нас.
Clearly keen to get on the phone, but I'll tell you who isn't. President Vladimir Putin of Russia. Trump and Putin were scheduled to speak on Tuesday, and this call was slated for 4 p.m. Moscow time. Before that, Putin was attending a business summit. Even as 4 p.m. neared, the Russian president showed no intention of leaving. When reminded, Putin shrugged it off.
По заявлениям Дмитрия Сергеевича Пескова, у вас разговор должен до 18 часов состояться с Дональдом Трампом. Не знаю, насколько он... Работа такая. Ну, не знаю, сейчас надо посмотреть, что на эту фразу скажет Трамп. Может быть, он любит интервью давать, может, уже отреагирует.
Трампа не упоминал, я
Не-не-не, он узнает, что у нас дискуссии.
Reports say Putin kept Trump waiting for 1 hour. It's an old Russian strategy. Leaders before Putin have also used it. In late 1949, China's President Mao Zedong visited Moscow, and Joseph Stalin made him wait for 5 weeks. 5 weeks for one meeting. Putin was certainly quicker than that. He made Trump wait for an hour, but it's not clear what his strategy is. Next week could offer some clues. Russia and the US, Russian and US officials will be meeting in Saudi Arabia on Monday. Ukrainian officials will also be in the kingdom on the same day. So let's see if something comes out of it. The Russian side is clearly keen to continue the fighting, especially because of the situation in Kursk. This is Russian territory, Kursk. Almost 90% of this territory has been liberated from Ukraine. So why would Putin pause now? As for Ukraine, it's all about the consensus in Europe. Zelensky is leaning on them for support and advice. Let's hope the Europeans advise peace and pragmatism. Do you think that Ukraine is at its weakest position?
This war is not about Ukraine.
Do you believe that your president was insulted? Yes or no question. Is Ukraine prepared to pay the price for that peace?
No compromises at the cost of territorial integrity and sovereignty.
Diplomacy will work?
Yes,
Do you think
will.
Russia will give up the territory if there is no ceasefire? Do you propose to keep fighting?
We are ready to resist.
Do you think there will be peace?
Many countries gave us 3 days.
President Trump said you don't have any cards.
We do not have another choice.
How do you keep fighting?
You are asking me once again the same question.
Because you've not answered my question.
We have enough capacities to keep fighting.
Good afternoon, Prime Minister Lakshman.
Good afternoon.
Making headlines in India well before you landed here. New Delhi has raised concerns in the recent past vis-a-vis the Khalistani separatists that operate in New Zealand. How do you propose to address these concerns?
In our democracy, we believe in the freedom of speech.
Organizations like the Al-Qaeda or ISIS were to hold a referendum in New Zealand, something related to one of your Western partners. Would you say the same?
We have very well-defined laws in our democracy.
No specific conversation on Khalistan on this visit.
It was raised with me. I also raised back our position.
Are you willing to be open to these concerns from New Delhi?
As I keep coming back to you to say, we have strong laws in our system.